Hey, folks, temperatures are dropping and stick season is officially here. What is stick season? No, it's not hockey season. It's the season when the leaves fall off the trees. You wouldn't know about it if you don't live in an area where the leaves, if you're down south.
Yeah.
Days are shorter, but our day-to-day stresses remain the same. In fact, I would argue they have increased. As we wind down 2024, you deserve rest and recharge. And thankfully, one of our favorite sponsors can help with that. The folks over at sunsetlakesabadeh.com have kicked off their Black Friday sale. And we're still like almost 2 weeks out. This time you won't miss it. You can save 30% site-wide when you head to sunsetlakesabadeh.com. Use the code FRIDAY. They make for great gifts. They sent us a really nice little gift packages.
Yes, they did.
They got everything you need to chill out, enjoy your holiday time, this holiday season. They got tinctures. They got gummies. They got topicals. They even got products for your pets. These make, honestly, great gifts. I have been gifting a lot of the calm ones. I've eaten all the calm ones around me. I've been gifting a lot of the calm ones and a lot of the good night gummies. They have like sleep gummies with melatonin, but for me, I like just the straight Sebadeh and Seba-N in my sleep formula. I take it as a tincture and as a gummy, and you can gift these things. Also, it's dry season, and that means I have got my Sunset Lake Sebadeh moisturizer. And, of course, I'm moisturizing my calves. For some reason, my calves are the only parts of my body that get itchy in the winter. Sunset Lake is also including some freebies this year. If your order is over $100, they'll throw in a free 20-count jar of Relax Functional Mushroom Gummies. And if your order is over $200, they'll also throw in a 20-count jar of the Focus Functional Mushroom Gummies. Check these out. Head over to sunsetlakesabadeh.com. Use the code FRIDAY. Save 30% off. See their site for terms and conditions. And now it's time for the show.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, November 18th, 2024. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Josh Cowen, professor of education policy at Michigan State University, author of The Privateers: How Billionaires Created a Culture War and Sold School Vouchers. Also on the program today, Trump confirms he will announce a national emergency on day one so he can use the military for mass deportations. Meanwhile, Mike Johnson says ethics panel shouldn't release the Gates report as he and Thune in the Senate gear up for recess appointments. Pete Hegseth, nominee for the Secretary of Defense, paid hush money to his rape accuser. Meanwhile, Hegseth was also flagged during Biden's inauguration by the National Guard as a potential white supremacist threat. Trump picks a gas executive as energy secretary, and the author of Project 2025's FCC chapter he has chosen as the head of his FCC.
What a coincidence.
Amazing. House Republicans revived the Kill Nonprofits bill, H.R. 9495, and this time it's likely to pass. Trump judge blocks Biden rule to expand overtime for nearly 4.5 million people. 10,000 nurses at Corewell Health in Michigan vote to unionize. Meanwhile, Biden okays Ukraine's long-range missile use inside Russia as Russia launches its largest attack ever on Ukrainian power grid. Israel, meanwhile, with our weapons, pounds Lebanon, and northern Gaza's largest two bakeries totally run out of flour as Gaza remains on the brink of total starvation. And Rudy Giuliani makes a down payment on the $148 million he owes to two election workers. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is Monday.
Fun day. So fun.
Maybe we should just say Monday.
Yeah.
Maybe we switch it from Monday Fun Day to Monday for a while and see
Although-
how.
Is that a song from like the 70s?
A manic Monday.
From the 60s, it is from the Mamas and Papas.
Yeah.
Oh, Manic Monday, another song, also kind of describes Trump's cabinet picks, right?
I guess so. We're going to go deep into the cabinet picks in the coming days and weeks. I think what we're watching is really as much about Trump exercising his power and setting a marker at the beginning of his administration that the Senate will do what he says. They will be nothing more than a rubber stamp. And if it means that they've got to go on recess so that he can get recess appointments in there, they'll do it. They will come up with 3 or 4 that are too difficult for the Senate to pass. They will do recess appointments. And as you know, a recess appointment only lasts 2 years, and it's unpaid. And I would anticipate that whoever gets these recess appointments are going to get a no-show job from Peter Thiel, from Elon Musk, from Sheldon, Miriam Adelson, whoever it is. So, we'll see. But we will get to that in a moment. But in terms of acquiescing, we're watching at the Republican Senate. They're claiming like half the Republican senators think that Gates is a non-starter, or there may be some problems with Hegseth. And no, that's all for show. There's basically people who are going to bow down to Donald Trump and those who are not. And let's just celebrate some who I am sure will not bow down to Donald Trump.
Resistance media.
Resistance media.
We need them now more than ever.
Let's just start with these guys because this is, these guys have real skin in the game, as it were. Here is Joe Scarborough back in January of this year, just 10 months ago, talking how disgusted he was with Ted Cruz for supporting Donald Trump.
I'm just curious, how does that happen? How does somebody have their family insulted, their spouse insulted, their father? My God, we forgot. Trump accused Ted Cruz's father of killing JFK.
Yeah. Right.
And so he attacked his father. He attacked his wife. I'm just telling you, I'm just speaking for myself. Most men I know, if somebody attacked their father and attacked their wife, game over.
Yeah.
Game over.
Just don't come
and
back.
They would spend the rest of their time going after that guy to take him down politically. Game over. But in this case, he's proud and enthusiastically supporting a man who said his father helped kill JFK.
All right. I mean, we get the point. Game over.
That's what it means to be a mighty man of
That's
valor.
what a man does. You come after my family, you come after my wife, buddy, it's game over. Look at this. Remember when Donald Trump said this about
his wife?
Mika, and I heard poorly rated Morning Joe speaks badly of me. Don't watch anymore. Then how come low IQ crazy Mika along with Psycho Joe came? Wait, where's the other one there? Yeah, to Mar-a-Lago for 3 nights in a row around New Year's Eve and insisted on joining me. She was bleeding badly from a facelift. I said no. Oh,
wow,
man. You know what? Game over, buddy. You don't come for a guy's wife. Right, right, Joe? Here, listen what Joe was talking about Donald Trump. This was just, when was this? A couple of, this?
Last year.
Yeah,
last year.
Last fall.
2 days, he threatens to, says the chairman of the Joint Chiefs probably should be executed. And then he says that the news network that is most critical of him should be taken off the air. This is not a reach. I could go back and talk about Nazi Germany, and I do it without any concerns whatsoever. And if people can't start drawing the parallels, well, you're just stupid, or you have your head in the sand, or you're one of them. But I'd rather.
Yeah, no, I mean, this guy, I love it.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Joe, for your service. I mean, and when you hear words like that, you realize that deep down, Joe is, realizes that they shouldn't have been so chummy with Donald Trump in the run up to 2016. That they knew they had done wrong. They were sucking up to power. They were sucking up to Trump. And these are people who clearly learned their lesson and are deeply principled. In fact, here, listen to what they said today.
Over the past week, Joe and I have heard from so many people, from political leaders to regular citizens, deeply dismayed by several of President-elect Trump's cabinet selections, and they are scared. Last Thursday, we expressed our own concerns on this broadcast and even said we would appreciate the opportunity to speak with the president-elect himself. On Friday, we were given the opportunity to do just that. Joe and I went to Mar-a-Lago to meet personally with President-elect Trump. It was the first time we have seen him in 7 years.
Now, we talked about a lot of issues, including abortion, mass deportation, threats of political retribution against political opponents, and media outlets. We talked about that a good bit. And it's going to come as no surprise to anybody who watches this show, has watched it over the past year or over the past decade, that we didn't see eye to eye on a lot of issues, and we told him so.
What we did agree on.
Pause it for a second. Hold on for a second. Did they disagree as to whether he was a Nazi? Or did they disagree over
Mika's bleeding face?
Mika's bleeding face? Did they disagree over that Joe Scarborough was a man who was going to say, game over to you, buddy? Game over.
It's interesting they didn't record this conversation as
mean
members of the media.
For journalists?
Yeah.
Oh, but look, they're being full disclosure. They're reporting that they went and hung out with him
and expressed some concerns.
And there were some things they did not agree to eye to eye. Whoa.
That's what it means to be a mighty man of valor.
Is there anything else we should hear about this? Did they make Donald Trump cry?
Past year or over the past decade, that we didn't see eye to eye on a lot of issues, and we told him so.
Whoa.
What we did agree on was to restart communications. My father often spoke with world leaders with whom he and the United States profoundly disagreed. That's a task shared by reporters and commentators alike. We had not spoken to President Trump since March of 2020, other than a personal call.
I just want to thank these two so much
for their service,
for resuming communication with Donald Trump. That was so helpful the first time when they were in constant communication with Donald Trump. I know we're just civilians, but can we get them a medal? Is there any way for us to give them a medal?
I mean, they wake up every morning at the crack of dawn for their morning show to make it in time to defend democracy. I mean, that's tough hours, buddy.
And then you throw in the fact that they're going to have to be in communication again with their new president, Donald Trump.
Wow.
I've been anxious. I've been anxious since the election, but knowing they've had this Mar-a-Lago summit, and people are willing to have these dialogues that are so important.
It's so important. Now they're not going to see eye to eye on everything.
Well, you never do in conversation.
No, you don't. And I think there's a great lesson for all of us. Wait, let's just hear what else. I am so moved and overcome with gratitude. Go.
President Trump since March of 2020, other than a personal call Joe made to Trump on the morning after the attempt on his life in Butler, Pennsylvania. In this meeting, President Trump was tearful. He was upbeat. He seemed interested in finding common ground with Democrats on some of the most divisive issues. And for those asking why we would go speak to the president-elect during such fraught times, especially between us, I guess I would ask back, why wouldn't we?
Especially
5
between
years
us.
of political warfare has deeply divided Washington and the country. We have been as clear as...
I'm sorry. They literally, this is, is there one show that's more responsible for the position that we're in right now than Morning Joe?
Consistently said, could be this show.
This show is Biden's favorite show that said every day you're doing a great job, Joe. Ignore the fact that no president has ever gotten reelected with this approval rating that hasn't ticked up in months and months and months. Ignore that fact. Stay in the race. In fact, they were saying after the debate that it was a rough night, but he should stay in, and that he's this foreign policy wonderkind and nobody could do it. They were the last line of defense for Biden staying in the race, which is exactly why we're in the situation that we're in right now. They're also probably the top show that has been pushing this never Trumper movement within the Democratic Party to the 100%. Forefront of these Democratic strategist ideologies. They've privileged that entire never Trump Republican thing, appeal to those folks. That's been their entire narrative. So both in terms of their close communication with Biden, which screwed us, and now apparently they're going to do the same thing with Trump, and just the ideology of the show, it's so toxic, and they're so self-satisfied. They're framing this within their conversation of their feud with Trump. No one gives a crap.
No, and let's just be clear here. I mean, we're going to just watch, and we have seen it, and we're going to see more of it. We're just going to watch capitulation after capitulation after capitulation. Bezos and the Washington Post not endorsing. I don't think the endorsement would have made a damn difference. But the fact that he's preemptively not running it out of fear of Trump. These guys running as hard as they could into Trump's embrace. Like 2 weeks after he wins. Not a surprise that they're going to capitulate first. Not a surprise in the first place. I mean, all of it was it's all just garbage show. But this is what you're going to start watching. You're going to watch the Senate do the same thing. They can talk, there can be senators and go like, well, we have advise and consent, but they're going to fall too. This is what's going to happen. Keep a record. Watch what happens. We're going to watch this and act accordingly to those people, because this is not going to be a normal administration. As much as the last Trump administration was not a normal administration, this is not going to be a normal administration at all. And the idea that we need to bring the country together based upon on what terms? No. If the country comes together, it's going to be under an authoritarian rule that oversees the complete destruction of our administrative state as a baseline.
And these are the folks that are saying it was wokeness that lost the election. I just want to remind you, these are the folks that are saying that. Don't give them an inch on this front.
In a moment, we're going to talk to Josh Cowen, professor of education policy at Michigan State University, author of The Privateers, How Billionaires Created a Culture War and Sold School Vouchers, and what he thinks we're going to see in the Trump administration, if there is still a Department of Education, which I think there will be. How is that going to function to destroy public schools in this country? Meanwhile, a couple of words from our sponsors. I worried about sleep these days. Exactly. But to the extent that I can get some sleep, a big part of the reason is because my sheets are temperature regulating.
Very nice.
Then it's not like a machine or anything. It just so happens that Cozy Earth sheets are not only sustainable, are not only incredibly durable and soft, but they also, because they are made from something called viscose, which is bamboo, they breathe. They don't heat up in the way that like some cotton sheets will. And they're incredibly soft, and they get softer every time you wash them. Thanks to Cozy Earth for sponsoring this episode. Give the gift of luxury this holiday season with 40% off using the code Majority Report at cozyearth.com/Majority Report. Not only are my sheets great, I have to say my favorite piece of clothing now is this hoodie that I got from Cozy Earth. Every time I put it on, it feels cool, and then it keeps me warm. It's both thin and heavy. It's not bulky, but it feels like a substantial hoodie. It really is my favorite piece of clothing now. It's basically on the weekends, all I wear. I mean, I wear sometimes a t-shirt underneath it, but it's like I don't get out of that hoodie. And then they also have they have sheets, like I say, which is a great gift to give to people. They have long sleeve bamboo pajama sets, both for men and for women. Also a great gift. Cozy Earth pajamas are designed for those cherished moments of relaxation, ensuring you feel cozy and stylish all season long. They also have bath towels, robes. I got a pair of joggers from them, which is also great. Cozy Earth's goal is to make a sanctuary within your home. With Cozy Earth, you can transform your space into an elevated haven where serenity and renewal intertwine effortlessly. I got to tell you, my home is not, there's no serenity and there's no renewal, but I feel very comfortable in my clothes.
That's good. That's good.
But maybe it works for you. Cozy Earth products are made with a durable weave fabric that won't pill. They're guaranteed for 10 years. And Cozy Earth prides itself on responsible production of its products, and Cozy Earth bedding products have a 10-year warranty. That's how much Cozy Earth believes in them. Wrap the ones you love in luxury with Cozy Earth. Visit cozyearth.com/Majority Report. Use my exclusive 40% off code Majority Report to give the gift of luxury this holiday season. That's cozyearth.com/Majority Report. If you get a post-purchase survey, say that you heard about Cozy Earth from the Majority Report, our podcast. That helps us. I also think I'm going to be getting someone some PJs. I've just decided that.
Good idea.
Also, I've been promoting GiveWell for, 4 or 5 years now, maybe more actually. GiveWell is a independent research organization that does research on charities. And they have now spent 17 years researching charitable organizations. And what they do is they direct funding to a few of the highest impact opportunities they've found. Over 100,000 donors have used GiveWell to donate more than $2 billion. And rigorous evidence suggests that these donations will save over 200,000 lives and improve the lives of millions more. GiveWell wants as many donors as possible to make informed decisions about high impact giving. You can find all of their research and recommendations on their site for free. And you can make tax-deductible donations to their recommended funds or charities, and GiveWell does not take a single piece of it. No cut. I'm not sure how they got started, GiveWell, but I will tell you, it is one of the most incredible things. Go over there and start with what they've gotten wrong to give you a sense of like, since I think it goes back to 2016, where they outline like, in 2016, we neglected to include this figure in our calculations. It changed it this much. Or in 2015, I mean, it's incredible how scrupulous they are, or scrupulously they do their research, and how completely transparent they are with everything. Here are some of the examples of donations to GiveWell's recommended charities. Bed nets to prevent malaria. Costs about $5 to provide one. Nets can reduce the number of malaria infections. Enough nets and large enough drop in infections can save a life in expectation. And then the other is vitamin A supplements. Costs about $2 to deliver a vitamin A supplement to a child. Vitamin A deficiency can increase mortality rates. Vitamin A distributions save a life by reducing vitamin A deficiency. Go to givewell.org, find out more, or make a donation. Select podcast, enter the majority report at checkout to make sure they know you heard about them from us. Again, that's givewell.org to donate, to find out more. This is the time of year when people start giving to charities. Your first stop should be a GiveWell. Honestly, I have donated through a bunch of different charities over the years. There are some of the ones I still continue to do, though they're not in their spotlight. But you can go back and look at some of their past recommendations. We will put the link in the YouTube and podcast description. All right, quick break. And when we come back, Josh Cowen, professor of education policy at Michigan State University, author of The Privateers, How Billionaires Created a Culture War and Sold School Vouchers. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigland on the Majority Report. Want to welcome to the program Josh Cowen, professor of education policy at Michigan State University, author of The Privateers, How Billionaires Created a Culture War and Sold School Vouchers. Welcome to the program, Josh.
Hey, Emma. Thanks for having me.
So let's just start with like the question about school vouchers, which is often sold to us as the notion of school choice.
Right.
But what do we mean when we say vouchers, or when they say vouchers work? Like without even showing the data and your assessment, that I know you did in the context of Milwaukee. But like, what is the goal that ostensibly they're pursuing here?
Yeah, so the idea here is it's any public vouchers or any public dollars that go toward private K-12 tuition and dollars that are only accessible to kids who leave or are never enrolled in public school. Those two things make something a voucher. And the idea is, at least sort of in principle, the idea is you give parents these dollars and they can kind of go shop for whatever school they want on whatever sort of metric they want to make those decisions with. The key catch here, of course, is the school has to take the kids with vouchers. It's the school's choice. It's not school choice. But that's the general idea, and that's the argument behind these things.
And we should say, like, just roughly speaking, I don't know if the dollars are accurate, but for instance, like in Arizona, I think it's $7,000 a kid, and presumably that's the amount of money that is spent in the public schools, right? I mean, or is it generally a like a percentage of what's spent?
Yeah, that piece varies a little bit state by state, but something like 80% or more of whatever is spent on the public schools as well. The voucher lobby folks would make the argument that it's a little less, but remember, that's not the full cost in a lot of cases of the private schooling that the kids and the parents have to bear. It's just some subsidy for it, mostly for kids who've already been in private school to begin with.
Yeah, let's get to that in a moment, because I think that's one of the key things. But is it ever, like, I mean, in Arizona, are there a lot of private schools? Like, what percentage does $7,000 cover? Of, like, how many private schools are available? And remember now, folks aren't going to travel 2 hours. I want to just remind people across the state. So, it's in some places there may be multiple private schools. Right. But generally, what percentage of private schools, and we should say parochial schools, because this is really the key. I think.
Now there are these micro schools too, but that's right. So we don't have great data, partly because data and transparency is a real problem with these voucher systems. We don't have great data on the number of schools that actually buys that, say, $7,000. But we do know that in Arizona and in Iowa, where we've been able to ask these questions, that schools often raise their tuition when vouchers come to town. So they actually there's the dollar amount, and then they price it up further once the public subsidy comes in. So it's kind of a moving target. That the answer to that question.
Okay, let's just address that question of, is it school choice? And then we'll get on. I mean, in reality, like how much choice is really involved here?
Well, one of the new features of the sort of this latest push of these voucher systems over the last 3 years or so is all of the old safeguards against, say, discrimination, all of the old requirements in some cases. And when I first started working on this 20 years ago, all of the old sort of pay to play or play to pay kind of rules requiring schools to have open admissions, things like that, they're gone now. So schools can, for the most part, private schools can, for the most part, take those dollars and do whatever they want with them as far as who they admit and crucially, who they reject at some point down the line, who they ask to leave. So it really, I say, eligibility is not access. Just because these things are available to parents does not mean that parents are going to be able to use those dollars to find a school home for their child.
So it's the school's choice, because they still, it's 100%. Not, they can decide whether or not to admit a student.
Yes, 100%. And one of the other pieces of this and all the new legislation here is there's new lines in each of the legislation that's new here that explicitly says that the school is not obligated to do anything against what it calls its creed or its value system to take these dollars. And that baked into that sentence in each of the new pieces of legislation is substantial freedom to discriminate against kids and families.
Yeah, and that means trans kids, gay kids, black, brown kids. Well, really, any kids on some level, right? I mean, it's probably a little bit more difficult under law to explicitly do it by race. But there's a lot of proxies that you can use in this instance.
Right, and that's going to be something that gets tested heavily in particularly the federal courts in the next couple of years, is whether or not a school could say, for example, because formally it is illegal to discriminate on race, even with private schools, and that's not been changed with new voucher legislation. But what's going to be tested is, for example, if a school in Arizona, Charlie Kirk, the kind of right-wing influencer, runs a couple of schools there, takes a lot of public dollars in doing so. Could that school say,
runs some schools there?
He does. Mm-hmm. They run a couple schools there. There's nothing stopping, say, the Kirk schools from say, well, we won't let any, it's against our faith to admit woke children or to admit kids and who might bring CRT into the classroom. That could be code for something. It's not clear what the courts would say about something like that, particularly the federal courts, which are often run out of, frankly, fairly right-wing judiciary frameworks.
Right. I mean, I guess theoretically, in the interview you have beforehand, you could be like, why was the Civil War fought? And if you say something about slavery, well, we're not going to be doing that here. We don't need that type of influence.
Right. In the older voucher systems, the schools have gotten really good too about the admission side, sort of making one decision and then sort of quietly, where there's a lot more attention. And then on the kind of, they ask somebody to leave 3-4 weeks later, a couple months later. So there's some screening that goes on the kind of back end of this too, that can really do some of what you're talking about.
Let's, since we're talking about race, let's talk about the origins of this voucher program, and then walk our way up through the history of who embraced it and why.
Sure.
So it starts with Milton Friedman.
Right. So Milton Friedman, a conservative 43-year-old economist in 1955, writes this thing, comes up with this idea that's later called school vouchers, give parents dollars, and explicitly makes this claim that you're doing so for so-called parents' rights. That phrase should be familiar to most folks listening today. It's kind of been resurrected. But parents' rights originally kind of was trotted out by Friedman And what was happening at this period of time in 1955 is just months after Brown v. Board ordered mandatory racial integration in public schools.
That's got to be a total coincidence. That's got to be a total coincidence.
Yeah, the archives say Friedman was working on this idea before Brown was decided. But of course, even back then when there wasn't social media, kind of knew these things were court cases working their way through the system. And what's important, there's a lot of Friedman defenders today on the right that'll say, Dr. Friedman wasn't a segregationist. To me, it's sort of irrelevant whether he personally was or wasn't. What is true and what is a matter of the historical record is that states across the South immediately embraced this as a segregationist idea and as a plausible way to avoid the orders of Brown versus Board. They created these things called segregation academies, which is actually in the news this morning, and ProPublica has a big piece about these former segregation academies. So whether or not Friedman himself is a segregationist, the point is that segregationists love this voucher idea, and that's kind of the origin story for these things.
Well, we should also say that the idea here, and I think it was most succinctly expressed, actually, by Betsy DeVos, and frankly, in DeVos's husband. Right. They were interviewed at a thing, and it was I think it was in 1993. Something called The Gathering, which is a Christian ideological group. Maybe you know this quote, but it's one that has stuck with me for, I guess 8 years, that the husband said they are for public education, but that's not the same as public schools. Public funding for education of all kinds, they are okay with the money coming in and existing to pay for school. That's what they consider public education. But they want to funnel this money into parochial schools and undermine public education. I mean, it's fascinating when you look at this. To remind people, the first time we had a Department of Education in this country was in Reconstruction. And that was for a specific reason, because we as a country in that brief moment felt it was necessary to educate former slaves and their children so that we could have a society full of equal citizens. So when Friedman does this, he may be just using the available sort of wedge, that being race, to further his goal of undermining public education.
Yeah, and it took a while for these things to get off the ground in modern form. The first modern one didn't really take place until 1990, when the DeVosses were very active in this space. And Betsy DeVos herself has said she sees these voucher systems as a way to advance God's kingdom on earth. She's lamented the fact that public schools, in her view, have displaced churches as centers of community, and wants churches to reclaim the space of centers of community instead of public schools. DeVos herself has also made very clear, and this is a new push that's coming up, frankly, that's been resurrected, to sort of get a final Supreme Court ruling that requires states to make vouchers mandatory in all states, especially for religious families, with the idea being that if you only make public dollars available to public schools and not religious families that see religious education as a core functioning of their religious tradition, then you're somehow discriminating or putting an undue burden against those religious families. So the DeVos folks, say what you will about them, at least they say the old quiet part out loud, to use that adage. And I think we should take these things very seriously about what they intend to do, particularly over the next 4 years.
Now, the sinew between Milton Friedman and DeVos, it comes from the Koch brothers.
It does, correct. So Charles Koch, in particular, founded a group called the Cato Institute in the 70s. Very big connection to Milton Friedman. They have a Friedman Liberty Award they still give out. Koch folks aren't kind of as into the Christian nationalism of the DeVosses. They're not quite as into the culture war stuff. You don't sort of see the Koch groups today spending a lot of time worrying about where kids go to the bathroom, or pronouns and woke and things like this. But the through line there is this kind of deep antipathy toward public schools, and frankly to public sector labor unions as well.
And how much of this is also, as you say, with public sector labor unions, an attack on teachers unions too? How much should that we read into that element of this?
I mean, there's always this, there's the philosophical, the strategic, and the tactical. And the philosophical is the stuff we've gone through. The strategic and the tactical, that's where things start to really matter on the ground. And that, what I mean by that is this is one sort of side benefit that we just need to kind of remember, that with all the big issues around democracy and philosophy, at the end of the day, a lot of this does come down to weakening political opponents and weakening groups that they have deep economic disdain for. And that I can't, there's no better type of organization out there than teachers unions in terms of the type of enemies that sort of unifies the right, whether it's the libertarian types like the Koch or the Christian nationalist types like the DeVosses. The teacher unions absolutely are in the crosshairs on this.
I remember from growing up, just like regular people watching Fox News, they hammered teachers unions on conservative media, I think, for decades, and built up this effort to demonize them. In a way, it's almost like they're cashing in now. But yeah.
Oh yeah. This is the. I mean, this is we're nearing like end game of this project. It feels like. Let's just step back and talk about the efficacy of these things, because clearly, like, there is the more students you have in a school, as you get closer to capacity, right, the more efficient those dollars are. And, you know, you see this in New York more vividly, you know, over the course of, I've had kids in public schools in New York for, I don't know, almost 20 years. You see this more vividly, like, it's not easy. You build a school and you don't know if there's going to be a couple of years where, like, people don't have kids in the city or they move out. And, like, all of a sudden it's a very difficult thing to sort of anticipate each year, to not have a school that's a little bit overcrowded or one that is underfunded. And pulling this money out of public schools, I mean, definitively, before we look on the other side of the ledger as to what it does for education, it undermines the existence of public schools. I mean, is there anybody who refutes that, even on the other side?
Well, the honest folks will say that's part of the goal. There's a lot of messaging that goes around trying to, and I write about this a bit in the book, but trying to kind of stand up the idea that this is a particularly efficient system to just use vouchers, and to and that it's somehow any different than any other interest group subsidy that we see across public policy. And it's really not. I mean, it's just a subsidy for existing private school students. That's what the data say. And that subsidy has to come from somewhere. It can't just, states can't afford two sectors of education. And so, yeah, when it's possible in the early days of these things to kind of hold harmless and to kind of carve out little voucher systems like they used to in the old days, while keeping public funding intact. But you go to states like Arizona, you go to states like Ohio, you go to states like Florida, where these things have really become system-wide, you're starting to talk about hundreds of millions, if not $1 billion a year, and states just can't afford to do that and make other priorities and commitments and keep the public school sector whole. And that's where you start to see these real funding threats come in.
Okay, so on one side of the ledger, it undoubtedly undercuts the existence of public schools. Let's talk about the other side of the ledger. Like, is there an educational benefit to students leave? I mean, because certainly, like, look, there are schools, particularly, I mean, not particularly, you can measure the quality of schools by basically looking at of public schools by looking at the income of or I shouldn't say the quality of the schools, but you can measure outcomes by income levels in school districts. I mean, it's almost a one-to-one relationship. So there certainly are places where it is, people living in poverty in certain areas. But the schools that they go into, broadly speaking, is it an upgrade, as it were, in their education?
So we don't know a lot about what goes on for the private school kids who've already been in private school before the voucher system turned on the cash tap from taxpayers. And that's about 70% of voucher users already in private school, never in public school to begin with. But that does mean that like 30% of kids do transfer. Historically, those have often been kids who've been lured away from public school to programs that were specifically targeted across the board. For those kids, we see, unfortunately, some of the worst academic declines we've ever seen on any research question in the education community. for those kids who do transfer from public to private school. And the reason for that, and this is really important because I think there's a lot of sort of perception that there's every private school out there is this kind of elite academy and the ones you might see in in big cities or suburbs. It's not the typical voucher receiving private school. Those academies do exist, those prep schools and things, but they're not the typical private school. The typical private school that takes voucher dollars in particular is what I call a subprime provider. They're financially distressed, often attached to a church or church basement even. Often they're a pop-up school that kind of jumps into the market once the tax dollars start paying and subsidizing that market. And those schools, it's hard to run a school. Public or private, it's hard to run a school. It's expensive to run a school. 40% of the private schools taking voucher dollars in Wisconsin, where I worked for a number of years, have failed and closed. So these are not particularly good, and that's what's driving the negative results for kids who do transfer from public to private school using these voucher systems.
That's interesting because I imagine that in a way to sort of obscure that data, they will include people who are already in private schools. And if you're already in private schools without a subsidy, more often than not, you're coming from a wealthy family. And if you're coming from a wealthy family, all the data in the world shows that you enter in starting at kindergarten with a multi-million, or hundreds of thousands of more words that you've been exposed to as a child. Your experiences are there. There's all sorts of support because you're wealthy. And so that data is dubious. So we don't even know if it actually helps. Well, we know that the outcomes are not as good. And frankly, there's a lot of religious schools where they're teaching stuff like creationism as opposed to things like science. I mean,
and that's probably on the academic side, the STEM subjects, math and science, particularly poorly served on these measures when kids transfer from public to private using vouchers. The reading results aren't quite as steeply declined, but it is in the STEM subjects specifically. And you're right. I mean, listen, not every private school parent, even without vouchers, is wealthy per se, but they're wealthy enough to make this thing work or comfortable enough to make this thing work. And the ones that aren't have often benefited from private scholarships and so on and so forth, just not the public dollars. But one of the ways that they've kind of gone about kind of tamping down on this, the last decade of results have been so bad that one of the new features, in addition to more permission structures for discrimination, fewer income caps, lots of those things. One of the new features is complete and utter lack of transparency, whether it's on academic outcomes, whether it's on admissions policies, whether it's on even things like teacher certifications, things like that in some cases. So it's as these voucher schemes are growing, it's becoming harder and harder to get real-time data on what they're up to, and this is by design. It's a feature, not a bug.
And I should add that having spent done a lot of interviews over the years about charter schools. Yeah. I can't remember who it was that wrote that book. He maybe was from the Hoover Institute. And he had embedded himself in Success Academy, I think it was, which is one of the most high-profile charters in New York.
Right.
And even he, who was ideologically disposed to supporting charters, admitted that what happened with charter schools in terms of their numbers is that they are not cherry-picking students, they're cherry-picking parents, because they will set up systems which will weed out parents who might be working two jobs, who might not have like the social, as they call it, the social capital, so that they can, spend more time with the kids, help them with the homework, et cetera, et cetera. And so we get a blinkered assessment of how like these private schools, like the charter schools, in many instances don't have the same sort of reporting requirements or admission requirements, or can obscure them. We see that same sort of like noise in the data about what private schools do.
Yeah, charter schools, to be clear, are a type of public school. They are independently run public schools, but they're kind of halfway on the spectrum between kind of public and the fully private versions that vouchers do. And a lot of these problems that you just described are rampant in charter schools, but they're even more so, times 1,000. When in these fully private schools that are just taking taxpayer subsidies through the voucher system, and nothing like the horrific results academically for for vouchers exists in the charter school research literature. There's some big downsides, and you did a good job kind of explaining what those are. But almost everything that we've kind of worried about with the charter sector, which is a school choice system within the public structure, so they can't discriminate formally, they can't do some of this stuff. All of it is times 1,000 when you deal with fully privatized private schools, just simply taking taxpayer checks out of the hands of parents and cashing in and moving forward like that.
Let's talk about what we can anticipate. Like, do you have a sense of? I don't think it's possible to get rid of the Department of Education, as Trump has claimed he wants to, just based upon what it would require from the Senate, et cetera, et cetera. But they can certainly kneecap it in many respects. Do you have an idea as to like who is on the list for Trump and what types of things they'll do? I mean, the biggest function of the Department of Education now is to oversee loans for higher education, which I imagine they're going to relax all sorts of things on private universities and for-profit, I should say, colleges, et cetera, et cetera. But what will we see? What can we anticipate, or what could they be doing? At the Department of Education.
So the big function, as you say, is in that higher ed space, but it's also distributing Title I dollars, which benefit many different communities across the board, including rural communities, isolated, remote communities. Those Title I dollars are lifeblood for some of those groups. Also, special needs programming and specialty that comes with overseeing special needs dollars and the expertise that comes there. It's important to remember that the U.S. Department of Ed, whatever else it is also the chief anti-discrimination authority in the United States when it comes to students, whether they're 3-year-old students or 30-year-old students. Getting rid of the Department of Ed, I sort of share your sense that it would probably be very, very difficult to do, particularly because of the Title I pieces that I think a lot of.
Will you tell people what Title I is? I don't
Title
think
I
most people.
Is the federal. Yeah, thanks. The Title I is the set of anti-poverty dollars. It's support from the federal government to particularly schools that struggle. Some of these are urban schools, but many of them are rural, remote schools, and they make up a bulk of funding historically for some of these sort of financially distressed districts across the country and students who may be low income as well.
We should say the primary way that we finance schools is by property taxes. And obviously, if you live in a low income area, the property taxes are lower because the houses have less value, and so the schools don't have as much money. So the feds come in through Title I and subsidize. Basically, when we say Title I, we're basically saying helping poorer communities raise the education that is available to their kids.
Right, and the other side, sort of the Trump type folks would say, well, we're not going to totally get rid of those dollars. We're going to just redistribute them across different federal agencies and give grants to the states. And, color me skeptical. It's going to be very difficult to do, especially when you're sort of saying that the entity whose entire job is to do that, we're going to take away. So it's unclear how they would make that thing work. And I think there's going to be a real big fight specifically on that Title I piece.
We should say also, the record's pretty clear what happens when you give block grants like Medicaid. States, red states in particular, do their best, and probably even some blue states do their best to keep people off those rolls. So if they can not expend those dollars in that way, or they can throw all that money into the voucher system and shortchange these low income school districts, they'll do it.
Right. There's nothing to suggest that there's not some real nefarious intent behind this stuff. And you kind of have to just go with the track record we've already seen historically from those types of efforts, like you mentioned with Medicaid, block grants, real programs that really are relied on disproportionately, often in red states as well.
What's also fascinating, though, is we just, Illinois, Colorado and Kentucky, just this past election, have basically rejected vouchers. Illinois had it and they reversed it. And we have at least one state where there's Supreme Court has thrown out vouchers. So it's fascinating. There seems to be, it's not huge margins, although Kentucky is pretty big. Explain what's going on there where, citizens seem to have the savvy to understand like this. There's something wrong with this voucher program.
Yeah, it's important to know that the opposition of vouchers, sort of among real voters, is bipartisan. So Illinois, you mentioned, sunsetted a voucher tax credit actually a few months ago. On election day, Nebraska became the first state to fully repeal a voucher system, and they did so 57 to the 43% margin, state that went for Donald Trump. Colorado didn't go for Donald Trump, but did reject a voucher system. And then Kentucky, 65% of voucher supporters, 65% of voters in Kentucky chose Donald Trump for the presidency 2 weeks ago. 65% of those same voters, so 65% rejected vouchers on the ballot, a very clear rejection. 120 counties, all 120 counties in Kentucky voted against vouchers, 119 of those by double digits, mostly rural parts of the state. This rural opposition to vouchers, both on the left and on the right, has been really what's kept these things at bay in places like not just Kentucky, but Texas and Tennessee. And for the simple reason that, listen, if one of the themes of this election, right, is that for better or worse, the kind of leading economic indicators and what was the Biden folks and the Harris folks and so on were saying, the economy is great, and folks on the ground weren't necessarily seeing how those numbers were working for kids and families in their communities. That same narrative, whether that's true or not, I'm not a political strategist, but I know that narrative is exactly what happened when it came to vouchers on the ballot. Is all these promises about school choice and markets and things like that just were not resonating with families in communities, including rural communities that vote overwhelmingly for Donald Trump. And that's been part of the historical pattern. Vouchers have never, ever, not once, survived a statewide ballot initiative when put actually to voters. And the reason is that most folks don't understand how this would help them, and they should trust their intuition. It doesn't.
What was the messaging? I'm fascinated by that. And I think, Andy Bashir, I think was very prominent in fighting school vouchers. And I think, people should just make a mental note of that. But what was the messaging? I mean, 65 to 35. I understand why they went for Trump. It's the nature of that area is going to be more sort of like a Republican, and particularly sort of like a Trumpian. But what was the nature of the message?
It was, that public schools have some shortcomings, but they do reflect their communities. They are built on their communities. They are centers of their communities, as Betsy DeVos herself would argue and wants to change. So I think, the idea that these voucher systems are going to come in schools and districts that don't really have any private schools to begin with, are going to come in and start taking state funding from local public school districts. That's everything from your community and your academics, of course, but it's also often in some of these places, public schools the biggest employer in the districts. There's Friday night football, right? It sounds just like a stereotype, but it's actually true. This is the kind of stuff that gets messaged out there in these communities. 4-H clubs, right? Think about all of the community programming and services that are kind of linked to public schools. And there's polling bears this up. I mean, people will articulate that, yes, we need to fix a few things on the margins about public schools in general, but I like my public school district. I like my public school teacher, even if I want to change the teaching professional. The folks really are skeptical when it comes to these voucher schemes, how they're going to help them if they're not already in private school to begin with. And I think that in this case, this is a real alignment between what the data show and what voters and parents are actually perceiving.
And I think you hit on something with the rural piece, because while opposition from voters to voucher schools is bipartisan, support for vouchers in our government is also bipartisan. I mean, Cory Booker from my home state was one of the champions of voucher schools, some time ago. Maybe it's a little less in vogue now, but is that more of the divide in terms of how Democrats who are in power are responsive to this?
I mean, there is a bipartisan version of education reform that does include school choice initiatives. It also historically included things like teacher evaluation programs, weakening of teacher tenure, and so on and so forth. The Obama administration pushed during those years. So certainly there's nothing that's that school choice and vouchers are not necessarily 100% monolithic in terms of where the parties land. But what's important to know, that said, is that the political energy coming from the voucher movement today, such as it is, and the money is entirely right wing. So there may be a handful of Democratic politicians and so on, and sort of interest groups that may be on a different side of this question. But this is absolutely a right wing movement pushed largely by three billionaires, Betsy DeVos, Charles Koch, and Jeff Yass out of Pennsylvania. And it's not an accident that we're having this conversation, the three of us today, in the middle of a world where book bans are back on the table, in a world where there's new attacks on LGBTQ identity and so on and so forth. Like, all this stuff gets packaged together. It is an absolutely right-wing movement when it comes down to it.
Well, Kentucky, if I'm not mistaken, was part of the so-called Red State Revolt that took place in 2017, 2018, where you had non-unionized. I think they are not allowed to be in unions in there. But they struck anyways. Was that right? I wonder how much sort of that kind of organizing also helps in those situations.
It's possible that was part of it. I think I sort of take the view, and I sort of say this in the book, that 2017 period of time was really kind of the Trump years saved the national voucher push by turning the conversation away from the horrific academic outcomes that were happening at the same time and coming out of the states at that time to more of a culture war argument, and kind of really a return to the origin story behind these things of separating out, isolating kids, and making different public policy depending on what their faith traditions were. And that's really, I think, kind of the status quo that we're at today. And it came out of that period of time in the early Trump years.
Do you have any guess as to who Trump is looking at for Secretary of Education?
You never know when it comes to Trump, but if I were to put my money on, I'd put it actually on Tiffany Justice, the Moms for Liberty co-founder.
Oh, Jesus.
Well, the good news is they
no pun intended.
They lost a bunch of their school board races, so
they did, but she is certainly pushing for this job, and we'll see what happens.
Well, I guess we'll see. We're gonna link that. It's hard for me to talk after that.
Yeah, I get you.
Josh Cowen, professor of education policy at Michigan State University, author of The Privateers: How Billionaires Created a Culture War and Sold School Vouchers. Very important for people to understand these dynamics, because this is going to play out. And the culture war part right there. Moms of Liberty. I mean, this is the way that they're doing it, and it's going to be. This is going to be an important fight, and actually could end up being like an important wedge issue that people use to, in some ways, disempower the Trump administration. Josh Cowen, thanks again. We will link to that at majority.fm and the podcast and YouTube.
Appreciate you having me very much.
Thank you.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break.
In the interest of bipartisanship, Democrats should nominate Chaya Reichik to be their Secretary of Education next time around.
Yeah.
What's that too?
In the spirit of bipartisanship.
You want to have one of these psychos in your cabinet.
Totally.
Just for, to have a team of rivals.
The lips of TikTok lady. That's who we need.
In February 10th, 2022, we had my buddy Chris Lee Allen from Dallas, Texas, talking about this. People might remember I got into Sam's chair for that. It was Thursday. But he actually made that exact same point, which is a lot of this culture war stuff. It is not just simply dismissible as culture war and bigotry. It is going at schools, and particularly in Texas, they love their public schools in rural areas because the charter school model just isn't sustainable. I mean, he even mentioned Friday Night Lights. It's a civic hub. And so all this stuff about, they're trying to trans your kids, they're doing litter boxes, they're doing all this sort of stuff is trying to attack people's, basically their feeling for their public schools. So that was, February 10th, 2022.
Iowa Ryan said Ryan Walters from Oklahoma. Oh, he is this lunatic. Psycho. And I just saw a story about it. He apparently put out some video about, how Jesus needs to be in the schools or something like that. This is the superintendent of schools, incidentally. I can't remember. We did a clip on him years ago, and I went on that show, Stitch and Adam.
Lilo and Stitch.
Yeah. Lilo and Stitch, yeah.
Well, I don't know what it is. But, and I remember they wanted me on because they felt I was too mean to this guy who was I can't remember the details of it, but whenever this guy pops up, I'm like, wait, what?
I had to talk to some idiots about that.
Yeah. That's basically what it was.
I don't remember
like,
what this was
coming
about.
on and like them going like, you were insulting to this guy.
Oh.
I'm like, I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the job.
Yes, Hack All Things. Dennis Prager already has videos in public schools as part of the curriculum. Surprised they wouldn't put him in charge of the DOE. Oh, that reminds me. He apparently had a very difficult fall and is in the hospital now, and in serious condition. I don't know, what his status is. I do know that, of course, Dennis would agree with me. God controls all things.
Yeah. We have some audio of the incident.
And very often when God is mad, apparently God does things to punish people. Now, I'm not saying that he would smite people, but sometimes,
not saying he won't.
But sometimes he injures people to do that. So there you go.
There you go.
No, I did not have any days off this week.
But we'll see.
The fall may have happened last Thursday. Whatever. I've been very busy. Folks, it's your support that makes it possible for me to travel across the globe and do things.
Secret Agent Sam.
That,
it's like those Jason Bourne movies when it's like Amsterdam. It shows like the...
Yeah, exactly. Always organizing. Oklahoman here. Walters completely controls the narrative here and has an easy path to be governor in 2026.
Might be nice to just put him in the administration then, huh?
I mean, let this guy enter into a presidential primary.
Yep.
I think, some of this stuff needs to be revealed, I think, to a broader audience and understand what the fundamental basis, and I do mean fundamental basis, is for much of these politics. And again, this is the way race is used. This is the way that cultural issues are used. And it's sort of like, Paul Wolfowitz's declaration as to the Iraq War. Weapons of mass destruction was the thing that we could all agree on. You had some people who were like, this is going to be a laboratory for free market capitalism. And other people who are like, well, this is going to allow us to control the flow of oil in our attempt to be a hyperpower. And you had others who were like, they tried to kill my daddy, and I'm going to show that I'm a tougher man. And as Wolfowitz said, the thing that brought everybody together was we could all agree weapons of mass destruction are bad, and we can pretend like there are actually some in Iraq. And that's how they sort of grew the political will. You see the same thing in the context of education. And you see it in the same thing in the context of a lot of things, frankly, which is for some, I just want to destroy public schools because public schools create a civic, in their minds, religion that supplants Christianity and fundamentalism.
Where were people getting lunch during COVID? It wasn't churches, it was schools.
And exactly. And they would like, essentially, Christian madrasas to be scattered around the country. They're perfectly willing to have some secular private schools as well. And then there are others who are just, full-on libertarians who just like anything that is communal, particularly schools, is problematic. And there are others who also know that, and they will use culture war, they will use race. And the race thing works both ways. Because again, public education exists as a thing. Public schools exist as a thing, as a reaction to wanting to make freed slaves full citizens, to do away with an attempt to do away with some type of underclass in this country. And radical Republicans at the time in the 1870s late 60s, understood the way that you do this is by educating your citizenry. We'll talk more about the project, but
I mean, like what you're saying about Bashir, and I know we're down bad if we're already talking about 2028, but like I really do think we should just note that he was successful in beating back the charter school push, and he's also done it by not throwing trans or gay kids under the bus. And he took out an op-ed, I think it was in the Times, basically pushing back on this notion that it was wokeness or accepting of trans kids that lost the Democrats the election. You know, that's just something to think about as we go, because those politics I want, even if he's not a radical, still he needs to be, or some like a democratic socialist. Those politics should be rewarded, because there's a lot of other people that are trying to blame it on things that didn't happen to fit their narrative and class interests.
Okay, again, you can support the show by becoming a member. Join MajorityReport.com. Also, don't forget JustCoffee.coop. Fair trade coffee, hot chocolate. Use the coupon code Majority. Get 10% off. Try Just Coffee. Honestly, great company, great coffee. And reasonably priced.
Yeah.
They give they're fair trade, so they pay everybody along the line, but it's all transparent. You can literally look it up on the back of a bag, every bag that you buy of coffee. Emma.
On ESPN today, we will talk about the NFL, really, the cream separating from the rest of the crop. Big wins for the Chargers, for the Bills defeating the undefeated Chiefs, for the I have these all the other ones written down. But, you know, Lions destroyed the Jaguars. We'll talk about all that on youtube.com/ESPN show today.
Go Pats.
Yeah, they did lose. My sister was at that game. My sister's a Pats fan. She was up in Boston for that.
Is that right?
Yeah, they lost. But the Rams are better than them. May looks okay. So
we'll see.
Matt.
Yeah, Left Reckoning Sunday, patreon.com/Left Reckoning. We had Jose Luis and Kurt from Soberania podcast covering Mexico politics, talking about the AMLO legacy and Claudia Sheinbaum's victory, as well as what we can expect under a Trump administration, and specifically talking about migration and things like that. So at patreon.com/Left Reckoning to get access to that.
Big Celtics game tomorrow night.
True. Oh, yeah.
It's the Cavs.
Undefeated Cavaliers.
Undefeated Cavs. I can't believe it.
About to get defeated. All right, folks. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Danner.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense.
You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males...
Psych. Fuck them. Snowflake says what?
What?
Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason
why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you. And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back, ladies and gentlemen. The Majority Report, fun half. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland. Henry. Hey, gang, feel free to reach out with questions. Hope you all enjoyed the care package by way of Cedar Seeds.
Oh, we did.
Yes.
I can't show it on camera, but
There's Cedar Seeds. Apparently grows into stuff.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
That's a real thing.
We will be back in May with Cedar Seeds. Well, I mean, you could get it now, I guess. But I don't know how many orders we get during
If you got the plug.
off year. Also, an issue that always bothered me is one of my favorite comic books getting placed on the banned books list, Sega. The claim was the book was anti-family, when in fact the story is about a family staying together during an intergalactic war. It's almost as if these groups don't read the books they try to ban.
Why?
Don't accuse them of being illiterate.
Right. And but what about it was anti-family? I'm curious. Like, what was even the case that they made?
All you guys are just why Trump won.
Yeah.
So, alpha male. Emma was finally about to talk about my beloved Cavs, and Sam cuts her off with his blatant Boston bias.